Greetings, fellow captains, and welcome back to World of Warships with the Hive Hand. And today's a little bit different. Obviously, I'm a bit of a fan of the game. I've been a fan of, say a fan is the wrong word, a bit of a buff when it comes to the history of World War I and World War II, particularly between the naval engagements between the British and the Germans, being British myself, obviously. But as I thought, I'm going to do a video on the USS Arizona, I started to look into the history, and instead of this being a sort of brief explanation about the ship and me talking about the gameplay, it's going to be more of a homage to the USS Arizona itself. So, the USS Arizona was a Pennsylvania-class battleship built for the US Navy in the 1910s, and named in honour after the 48th state, which recently was admitted to the Union, and was the second to last of the Pennsylvania-class super dreadnought battleships ever built. The Pennsylvania-class ship was significantly larger than the previous Nevada-class, with an overall length of 608 feet, a beam wide of 97 feet, and the draft of 29 feet 3 inches. And her total displacement was just shy of 30,000 tons, and fully loaded could be just shy of 32,000. The Arizona carried 12 14-inch guns in triple turrets. They were numbered 1 through 4 from the front to the rear of the ship, and couldn't be elevated independently of each other. They were all limited to 15 degrees with a maximum range of 19 kilometers. The ship carried 100 shells for each of the guns, and defense against torpedo boats were provided by 22 5-caliber guns mounted individually along the side of the ship's hull. So the keel of battleship number 39 was laid in the morning of 16th of March 1941, with Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time, Franklin Roosevelt, in attendance. And the builders intended to set a world record of 10 months between keel laying to launch, and the New York Times declaring the world's biggest and most powerful, both offensively and defensively, super dreadnought ever constructed. The ship was made, took a little bit longer. It took 15 months from keel laying to launch, and the ship was, like I said, named after the late new estate by the Secretary of Navy, Joseph Daniels. So shortly after its commission, the USS Arizona was sent to Guantanamo Bay and spent much of its time training in the Caribbean before becoming an escort for the Paris Peace Treaty when tensions between Greece and Italy began escalating. After returning to the Brooklyn's dockyard for upgrades, the Arizona, accompanied by 6 other battleships and 18 destroyers, was sent to Panama Canal in the early 1921 before heading for Peru for battle practice. Now, controversy did hit the Arizona in March in 1923, where a female stowaway traded sex for safe passage to San Pedro when she was discovered whilst docking in Panama. The captain at the time, Percy Olmsted, was court-martialed and convicted to a 10-year prison sentence. All the officers on the ship received a letter of reprimand from Admiral Henry Wiley at the time. This included a young ensign by the name of Arleigh Burke, who would eventually become an admiral and chief of naval operations. So through the rest of the 1920s and most of the 1930s, the Arizona spent a relatively uneventful life, mainly performing escort duties and battle practices, right up until the fateful day on the 7th of December 1941, when the Imperial Japanese Navy, using 6 of their aircraft carriers, attacked Pearl Harbor. The sirens went off just before 1800 hours, and at 1800 hours, 10 Nakajima torpedo bombers commenced their attack on the Arizona, scoring 4 hits and 3 near misses with their 1,800-pound bombs. At 0806, Turret 2 suffered a penetrating hit near the magazine, causing a cataclysmic explosion that tore through the front of the ship, collapsing the front deck, including Turrets 1, Turrets 2, and the conning tower. The explosion was so large, the nearby repair vessel Vestal, which was on fire at the time, had its fires blown out by the shockwave. 1,177 of the 1,512 crew never made it off the ship, accounting for almost half of the lives lost during the attack. Unlike the USS Constitution, the Arizona is not perpetually in commission. The Arizona is now, to this day, under control of the National Park Service, and the US and still retains its title. The Arizona retains the right in perpetuity to fly the United States flag as if she was an active service commissioned naval vessel. The wreck of the Arizona remains at Pearl Harbor to commemorate the men of her crew lost their lives on the morning of December 1941. And on the 7th of March 1950, Admiral Arthur Radford, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet at the time, instituted the raising of the colours over her remains. A legislation during the administration of the presidency of Dwight Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy resulted in the designation of the wreck as a national shrine in 1962. A memorial was built across the ship's sunken remains, including a shrine room with listing the names of the members of crew who lost their lives on a marble wall. The National Memorial is administratively listed on the National Register for Historic Places. The ship herself was designated a historic landmark on the 5th of May 1989, and upon their death, survivors of the attack may have their ashes placed within the ship amongst their fallen comrades, and veterans who served aboard the ship at other times may have their ashes scattered on the water above. Every 2 years, the Navy awards the USS Arizona Memorial Trophy to the ship, determined by the Chief of Naval Operations for ship vessels that have achieved the highest combat readiness in strike warfare, surface fire support, and anti-surface warfare. The 3-foot-tall bronze trophy on a black marble base was provided to the Navy by the citizens of Arizona on the 7th of December 1987. I also discovered 2 books written by survivors from the atrocities that happened on that fateful day. I won't go into too much detail about the books. If you're really interested, you can go out and purchase them yourself. The first being All the Gallant Men, written by at the time a young sailor called Donald Stratton. He recalls it was a hell of a day. It started out real nice, but then, well, you know the rest. Stratton was a 19-year-old seaman at the time. The rest involved a miraculous feat of survival when the 1,760-pound Japanese bomb hit the Arizona. It ignited 1,800 gallons of aviation fuel, 500 tons of gunpowder, and more than 1 million pounds of munitions. The explosion engulfed the ship in a 50-foot-tall fireball that ripped through the anti-aircraft platform where I was standing at the time. He recalls, "I still don't have any fingertips." Stratton spent a year recovering in military hospital and then, inspiringly, re-enlisted in 1944, partly out of a sense of revenge, he says, but he's come to realise over the years that those Japanese pilots were just obeying commands, the same as we are. The second book is written by a gentleman called Lauren Burner, a 22-year-old serviceman at the time. and his novel, based on his experience, the second to last to leave the USS Arizona, co-written with Edward McGrath and Craig Thompson. He recalls, "I remember I got up that day and had breakfast. That night I was supposed to have a date with my gal. Didn't quite get there. When the bomb struck the Arizona, the explosion trapped Burner and 6 other men inside a metal box on the forward mast. Like Stratton, Burner was burnt all over, more than 2/3 of his body. But as a sailor on the deck of the nearby repair ship, Vassal, spotted the men, threw them a line to the burning vessel. Burner and his team managed to cross safely, despite charred skin falling off their bodies. Half a year later, and after a stint in 2 hospitals, Burner was reassigned to his second tour of duty, which took him to the Aleutian Islands in the Philippines and to Nagasaki in Japan. Despite the horrors, he survived Pearl Harbor, and the site remains a haven for him, heading there yearly to join the other Arizona survivors. He said, "It's like going back home. I know them so well." Despite the horrific incidents of that fateful day, Daniel Martinez, the Park Service's chief Pearl Harbor historian, has said about how much it has changed since he took over in 1984. In 1991, he said, "We hosted 6,000 Pearl Harbor survivors and their family. Lately, we're lucky if we get 200. But the biggest change isn't quantitative. The memorial has changed a lot because the country has changed a lot, and the people who built the memorial faded. The memories reshaping itself in its interpretation and meaning. It has slowly changed from a war memorial to a peace memorial." The shift began in 1991, where President George W. Bush, commemorating the 50th anniversary attack, gave a speech including the lines, "I have no rancor in my heart towards Germany or Japan, none at all." This was further continued by Bill Clinton in 1995, and 2016, which marked a great progression. On December the 26th, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited Pearl Harbor with President Obama, becoming the first sitting Japanese leader to ever survey the site. And in doing so, he reciprocated with a historical trip for the president to visit Hiroshima the same year. Martinez says that all of these things show the memorial becoming an ode to inclusiveness and shared experience. A lot of people didn't realise that it's not just for the USS Arizona crew, it's a memorial for all those killed in Pearl Harbor, including the Japanese and the 49 civilians who succumbed to friendly fire. And I quote, he says, "The key is we need to celebrate 70 years of peace between Japan and the US. This relationship we've developed is moving us forward. The point is not to forget what happened in 1941, but to forgive what happened back then and show the greatness of our nation in the case of both nations' interests." Martinez also states, "We've had a Japanese tea ceremony on the memorial, a prayer service, and our museum has become a place of healing, and that's something I never thought I would see, but it's happening." So I think in closing, we can sort of consolidate that not only was the incidents surrounding the USS Arizona horrific and a true sort of testament to the horrors of war, but also quite inspirational, the fact that after all this time, it's turned into a place of peace, unifying nations over the loss that was suffered in such horrific circumstances at the time. And for me, being a Brit, looking a bit deeper into the Americans' participation, or more so the Americans' war with Japan during the time of truly the scale of how horrific the war was. In Europe, at least anyway, I think we tend to focus a lot on what happened in Europe. Yes, we had the Holocaust. Yes, Nazi Germany took over most of Europe, killing countless people, and we tend to forget about the other side of the war. And it was a real lesson and a real eye-opener. So I'm going to leave it there and leave you with a couple of images of the USS Arizona in all her glory, and that's a couple that I found of what happened shortly after the attack. So until next time, take care and goodbye.